What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Christmas. Here we are looking at, you see them, you know them, the 12 days of Christmas. For Americans, and I imagine for many English-speaking people as well, from other countries, the 12 days of Christmas mean little more than something to do with partridges, drummers drumming golden rings and stuff like that. It's a song. They might have a vague idea of it being an old-timey thing that medieval English people did, but I know that most of the Americans I know, including my mom, because this is what she told me when I was a kid, think that the 12 days of Christmas start on December 13th and end on Christmas. So the 12 days of Christmas being the 12 days leading up to Christmas, when in fact, as you know, as here we are, however many episodes deep into this series now, you know that the 12 days of Christmas are the 12 days running between Christmas and Epiphany on January 6th. Some people reckon it starting on December 25th. Some people reckon it starting on December 26th. It doesn't really matter. The space between Christmas and Epiphany, that's what we're talking about. That makes Epiphany Eve on January 5th the 12th night that Shakespeare was celebrating with his famous cross-dressing comedy. But for some cultures, the 12 nights of Christmas were, and in some places still are, a time when the spookiest things possible are roaming around looking to make trouble. It's a liminal period in the space between years. The old year is ending, the new year's not quite yet started. It's that weird mushy border space. So there, the line between night and day, living and dead, and so on becomes unbearably fuzzy. In Germany, this period is known by various names, including ones that translate as the between nights, the under nights, the oracle nights, or the knocking nights, but they're most commonly known as the Rauhnächte, which means, well, no one knows exactly what it means. It might come from an old German word meaning hairy, because of the fur-wearing, furry costumes that get sported during this period. Some think it might come from a word meaning rough or raw. But the modern understanding, whether it's true or not, the generally accepted understanding is that it's related to the German word Rauch, which means smoke, which would make the Rauhnächte the smoky nights. Why would they be smoky? Well, it used to be the tradition that during this time people would burn incense to try and smoke out evil spirits from their homes and their barns and wherever. They would swing censers full of incense to get the bad juju out, right? That particular tradition has mostly died out, but the tradition of burning incense at Christmas time can still be seen reflected in the popular German Christmas decoration known as the Räuchermännchen, or Little Smoking Man. Here's a couple examples. They're little incense burners shaped like various traditional characters. There's a lot of different kinds. This is just a couple. Like a chimney sweep, that's very traditional, but like an old style hunter, that's a thing. You can get ones that look like Santa Claus or animals or whatever. Generally, like, you would pull the top of his body off here, and there'd be a place where you can put like a little cone of incense that you would burn, and then the smoke comes out of his mouth like he's smoking. Anyway, the Rauhnächte were a time full of various and sometimes contradictory superstitions. Generally, you're supposed to leave your doors and windows open in order to give free passage to any ghosts or witches that might be flying through. But on New Year's Eve, one of the 12 nights, you were only supposed to leave the back door open so that good luck could fly in and then not fly out. It would come in the back door and wouldn't be able to escape, so you'd have good luck. You weren't supposed to hang out laundry to dry because ghosts might get tangled in the clothesline. You're supposed to keep your home as clean as possible, since roving spirits might be attracted to dirt. We'll see least one example of that later. We've already seen some in previous videos as well. You're not supposed to cut your hair or your fingernails. You're not supposed to use any kind of machine that uses wheels, as only the wheel of fortune, not the show, the concept of the randomness of fate. Only the wheel of fortune should be spinning during this time. And we will see that definitely there is another figure out there who for sure wants you to have your spinning done by the end of the 12 days of Christmas. So that one, definitely not a hard and fast rule. Generally don't go out after dark for fear of monsters, like these guys you see lurking about. But if you do dare to go out, you might see and hear all sorts of wonderful things, including rivers turning into wine, the earth opening up to reveal its hidden treasures. You might hear animals talking at midnight on Christmas Eve, but be careful because they might say bad things about you. Like many other nights during the winter holiday season, the 12 nights of Christmas are good for telling your future, especially that good love future. If you want to know what your future spouse might be, there's all sorts of divination games, including, of course, Blygeisen, which we've discussed in multiple videos up to this point. There's also one where you just have a pile of sticks and you randomly grab one, and the way the stick looks is indicative of what your future husband will look like. He might be long, short, crooked, who knows. Or you, as the oven is heating up, you put your ear to the oven and you listen for sounds, and different sounds can mean different things. If you hear music, that's a good sign. I don't know, and so on. Other divination games. But the forests and mountains were full of ghosts, witches, and monsters lurking about during this most haunted of seasons, including, but by no means limited to, the Druida, who we've discussed before, was the night hag that will smother you in your sleep, and that can only be driven off with the Druidenfuss, the pentagram. Then you've got the Nebelfrau, the mist woman, who lures travelers away from the safety of the road out into the forest or marshes or whatever. I don't know. Then you've got the Zeilvogel, the soul bird, whose call portends death, and who carries the souls of the damned off in its claws. The Maelweibel, the flower woman, who haunts mills and crushes the miller in its gears. The Durandal, a goblin who haunts glassworks, who emerges from the furnace at night to destroy the day's work or set the workshop on fire. Voidhausmich, a monstrous cowherd who can be seen clubbing his own cattle to death with a dried bear claw and then eating them raw. The witch Vechlin, who is cursed to dance the length of the 12 nights in a pair of burning slippers for the crime of, in life, beating a child to death with her own slipper. And then you've got the dark versions of saints that we've discussed in previous weeks, the Lutzelfrau, the Wild Barbaras, and so on, who are loose during these nights. In most areas, the Rauhnächte are the 12 nights between Christmas and Epiphany, but in some areas, they actually end on New Year's, which means that the first day is December 21st, which is St. Thomas Day. This St. Thomas is St. Thomas the Apostle, who you may remember from the Bible as the guy who wanted to put his fingers in Jesus' holes real bad, as seen here in this image. In Bohemia, it was once believed that on St. Thomas Eve, the apostle himself would appear at midnight, dressed in bishop's robes, flying on a chariot of fire. He would fly to the graveyard, at which point he would call forth the souls of everyone buried in that churchyard who was named Thomas, who was baptized under the name of Thomas, at which point they would all rise from the dead. They would gather together and pray, and this power of their communal prayer would cause a large cross that had been set up over the graveyard to glow with a miraculous light. Then Thomas would ride off, and the rumbling wheels of his chariot flying away could be heard like thunder around the graveyard. However, just as the coming of Lucy and Barbara, like we saw in previous installments of this series, brought out their dark counterparts, so too does the coming of St. Thomas Day bring out a menacing figure known as Bloody Thomas. Bloody Thomas. He's also known as Damo mit dem Hammer. He's Thomas with the hammer. He is described as being a blood-soaked ogre brandishing a large hammer, which is also dripping with blood. And he's out there, and he's lurking in the forest, and he wants to crush your skull with his giant hammer. The origin of this tradition might lie in the fact that St. Thomas Day was a traditional day for slaughtering animals and making sausages, and so some people might have gotten spooked by some bloody but regular human butchers walking home. But apparently a common prank in the 19th century was for farmers to drench themselves in blood on St. Thomas Eve and then scare their own kids by banging on the windows and threatening to hammer their skulls in. Just good, clean holiday fun. A well-known monster that you have heard of, but that we don't consider to be a Christmas beast anymore, was at one time inextricably tied to the season, to wit, werewolves. Records from numerous real-life werewolf trials from the Middle Ages show us that popular belief held that the 12 nights of Christmas were, together with midsummer, the summer solstice, were the most common time for people to change into werewolves, and for those werewolves to be loose and about. The threat of werewolves at Christmas was so widely feared in some areas that it was actually forbidden to say the word wolf during the Christmas season for fear that you might summon one, so you have to use some kind of euphemism like the enemy or that pest or whatever. You can hear me, your friend Benito, you can hear me talk at length about Christmas werewolves on the Weird Christmas podcast with my friend Craig Kringle. Check it out on your podcast app of choice. But in much of Europe, in fact, it was believed that anyone who was born during the 12 days of Christmas would grow up to be a werewolf. Why? They were cursed for the audacity of trying to upstage Jesus on his birthday. That's the idea. The same curse was supposed to apply in Greece and other parts of southeastern Europe, only the curse in this case didn't change the person into a werewolf. Instead, they became a Kalikanzaros. The Kalikanzaroy, in the plural, are goblins who are believed to live underground for most of the year, trying to chop down the world tree, the tree that holds the world up, and thereby destroy the earth. However, when the solstice comes and the sun stops in its course, Kalikanzaroy are lured back up to the earth, where they make trouble for 12 days. The goblins enter houses either through the doors or the chimney, and then they get to work destroying the house. They overturn furniture, break it, they eat all the Christmas food, they poop in any other food that they want, any open containers of food or drink, get a number 1 or a number 2 in them, and then they just generally cause terror among anyone who lives inside the house. In some cases, it's said that they'll hop on a person's back and force them to dance until they collapse from exhaustion. However, you're not defenseless against these little goblins. You can protect yourself by tricking it into staying out until the sunrise, vampire style. You can set out a colander or like a strand of tangled flax hanging at the door. What will happen is before the goblin even comes inside, it'll stop to count. This is very similar to vampire lore. Some of you probably recognize this, but it will count the holes in the colander or the threads of flax. This will keep them busy until sunrise, at which case the sun will come out and they'll die. Or if you're really lucky, he'll count out loud, and when he gets to the holy number 3, he will be killed by the power of the Trinity. Other means of warding off Kalikanzaroy include putting a black cross on the door, blessing the house with holy water and basil. Fire. You can keep them from coming down the chimney by keeping a fire lit at all times. So at Christmas time, it's traditional for Greeks to keep fires burning at all times, and especially using items that produce stinky smoke, like old shoes, salt, or a special kind of Christmas log that is known as a skarkantzalos. Might be an added deterrent to keep Kalikanzaroy from climbing down your chimney. Or you could try to bribe them by hanging a pig's jaw, sweetmeats, or sausages behind the door or in the chimney as a kind of peace offering. But the strongest deterrent against Kalikanzaroy comes on the day of Epiphany. The sun, first of all, starts to move in its course again. Obviously, the sun has stopped moving for 12 days. We all know that. It's standard astronomy. And a priest comes and blesses the waters. And what happens is the priest blesses a cross, throws it into the water, at which point a bunch of daring young men will dive into the freezing waters, and the first one who recovers the cross, like this guy here in the front, will find himself lucky for the rest of the year. Once the waters have been blessed, priests go from house to house, blessing each home with holy water. The Kalikanzaroy can't handle that, so they return in a panic back under the earth to the world tree, where they find that it has completely healed in the 12 days that they were gone, and so their year-long work of sawing and chopping at the tree has to begin anew. Anyway, the 12 days of Christmas are also a time for numerous mumming and wassailing customs, where you have roving bands of costumed entertainers traveling from house to house. We've looked at several examples of this throughout this series. The idea is they exchange performances for gifts of food and drink, but one of the most notable of these customs is the Welsh tradition of the Mari Lwyd, or the Grey Mare, who is a spooky skull horse that wants to challenge you to a rap battle. The Mari Lwyd itself is made from a horse's skull, usually a real horse skull, although sometimes you can find wooden ones or ones made from other materials, but usually a real skull, decorated with ribbons, pieces of glass in there for eyes, other shiny things, and then attached to a pole, which is then covered with a white sheet that covers up both the pole and the person operating the horse. Sometimes, but not always, there's some kind of mechanism within the jaw that lets you snap the jaw shut. The Mari Lwyd travels at night with an entourage of usually 4 to 7 figures who might be usually in costume. They might be musicians, they might have fancy hats or whatever, and they often include stock characters such as a guy who's supposed to be the leader, whose job is supposed to keep order while surrounded by these chaotic carnival-style figures. You have the Merry Man, who's kind of a jester kind of figure, and then Punch and Judy. You might have heard of Punch and Judy. They're typically puppets, but in this case, they're walking around with a skeleton horse. Anyway, the crew comes to a house. They try to request entry into the house via song. The people of the house have to offer reasons why they can't come in, usually also in song. The mayor, of course, has a second verse prepared and will retort, and they have to go back and forth, and until one person runs out of rhymes or reasons why the party can't come inside. The house always runs out of rhymes before the mayor. So the party then comes into your house for food and drink, and the various characters make a mess of things, with only the leader there to try and restrain the chaos. A completely different kind of wassailing happens not too far away in Western England on Twelfth Night, in which usually men, but now women as well, go out, but traditionally it was men. They go out to an apple orchard with a bowl of wassail and some bread and some other stuff to bless the apple trees in hopes of a bountiful harvest. Slices of bread or toast get affixed to the branches of the tree. Cider gets poured over the roots. Then the people recite traditional rhymes. They sing, shout, they bang pots and pans, they fire guns into the air to awaken the trees and frighten off evil spirits. An example of the rhymes they might say, a traditional rhyme, is "Wassail the trees that they may bear you many a plum and many a pear, for more or less fruits will they bring, as you do give them wassailing." Obviously that mentions plums and pears, but it's usually apple orchards. Anyway, probably the most widespread belief of spooks on the prowl during the 12 nights of Christmas is the Wild Hunt, a horde of spectral hunters with an equally supernatural leader flying through the sky like a thundering train. These hunters are believed variously to be unbaptized souls, lost ghosts, phantoms of valiantly slain warriors, or any number of figures who might be at their head. The most common leader of the wild hunt is the Germanic god Wotan, also known as Odin, conducting his furious army as a storm of phantoms through the clouds. Other leaders of the hunt might include Knecht Ruprecht, King Herod from the Bible, Cain, as in Cain and Abel, the devil, the Danish king Valdemar, the historical real person Count von Ebernberg, who according to legend was cursed to ride the skies forever for skipping church to hunt. In some areas, the leader is known as Hackelberg, similarly cursed for skipping church. During the 12 nights of Christmas, his hunting horn can be heard amidst the thunder, and he is said to be seen riding on a black horse with smoking nostrils, accompanied by a pack of hellhounds, and preceded by the Tudosel, which is an owl possessed by the soul of a nun, whose horrible singing and life sound like the screeching of an owl. In the U.S., the wild hunt is reflected in the story of the Ghost Riders in the Sky. They do not, as far as I know, usually come at Christmas. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo. Ghost Riders in the Sky. A notable wild hunter is the Swiss legend of Tourst, who can be recognized by the sound of his hunting horn and his pack of three-legged dogs, whose barks resound through the mountains near Lucerne. Anyone who gets caught in his path is transformed into one of his spectral three-legged hounds and forced to join his hunt. As he passes by farms, livestock would scatter, cows would go mad and stop giving milk. Torst is often accompanied by his wife, the child-eating witch Stragula, who is, I don't know, probably one of these, and then the fire-eyed phantom, the Pfaffengaler. The wild hunt, however, is rarely depicted as an actual hunt, as in with a specific target or prey in mind. It's usually just a raucous ride by wild, noisy spirits thundering through the sky. However, some traditions hold that the wild hunt is actually on the lookout for a specific thing, usually poor, innocent spirits of the woods called moss people, or more specifically, the most viable, the moss women. They're looking for moss women to kill. Like this incredibly artifacty JPEG that I found. Killed by artifacts. In some areas of Germany, it was actually customary to try and help out the moss people by marking felled trees with 3 crosses to make them kind of safe hiding places for the moss people to hide out from the devilish phantom huntsman who would not be able to bypass the security of 3 crosses. But for you, the living, the wild hunt, it's essential to treat it with respect, lest they destroy your property, curse your family, your livestock. Leaving barn doors open for ease of passage was a common sign of courtesy for the roving band of hunters. Several folktales reflect the consequences of disrespecting the wild huntsman. In one story, a man witnesses the wild hunt and imitates the huntsman's trademark cry of, you're not going to believe this, but I swear it's true, of ho ho ho. Yes, it's true. It is a popular folk belief that Odin, or someone like him with his long white beard, flies on a white horse through the sky at Christmas time, shouting ho ho ho. Yes. It's yes. Yes. Anyway, the guy makes fun or imitates, copies the ho ho ho, and as a result, he's rewarded, quote unquote, by finding a terrible gift in the morning, a portion of the caught and slain most viable, the moss woman, nailed to his door. One guy asks to join the hunt, and in return, the haunch of a slain horse falls down his chimney. In some stories, disrespect of the hunt gets you eaten by the hunter's hellhounds. One of the most notable figures to lead the wild hunt, however, not a man in this case. It's the winter goddess, known variously as Holda in northern Germany, or Perchta, Berta, various other versions in the south. She's a protector of agriculture, household crafts, especially spinning, and children. In addition to being known by two names regionally, she also has two sides to her. She can appear as a tall, beautiful young woman, like you see here, shining goddess, or she could be a hunched-over, wrinkled old woman. In her young form, she can be seen in gleaming white clothes that look like the sun shining on fresh snow, but can still be recognized by what's called her swan foot. It's 1 foot larger and flatter than the others, like a swan's foot or a duck foot, right? The idea is her foot is splayed out from using the pedal on her spinning wheel. As an old woman, she looks very witchy. She has a long, crooked nose, sometimes being depicted as being made of iron. And just as she has beautiful and ugly forms, she likewise can be either a gentle protector or a cruel dispenser of punishments. Holda or Perchta is closely associated, as I said, with the art of spinning thread. In some legends, she was the first to teach humans how to spin flax into linen, and so she watches to make sure that her art is not lost. On Christmas Eve, as Holda begins to make her rounds, flax is loaded onto the spindles, and Holda promises that she will grant as many years of good luck as there are threads on the spindle. But all the spinning must be finished by Epiphany, when Holda promises she will inflict as many years of bad luck as there are threads left on the spindle. But if someone has worked hard at their spinning, she might come in the night and finish their reels for them. But if they've been lazy, she might come and rip up what little work they've already done while they sleep. Or, and this one is especially associated with the southern Perchta version, if they've done well, she'll leave silver coins in their shoes. But if they have not behaved, haven't finished their spinning, hold on a second, it's a little worse than coal. She'll slash open their bellies, remove their innards, lay them on the floor, and now stuff their empty bellies with straw, rubble, and other trash, and then sew them back up, not with a needle and thread, but with a plow and an iron chain. Normal Christmas stuff. Normal Christmas stuff. Because she makes her rounds at midwinter, Holda, Perchta, is connected with the wintertime and its weather. Tradition says that when she shakes the feathers from her bed, the feathers fall to the earth as snow. The smoke from her fire is what causes wintertime fog, and the great rumbling sound of thunder is heard when she winds up her flax. Whether as Perchta or Holda, she leads a large host of followers and the wild hunt, just like Odin and the others. Generally, in the north, her procession is said to be made up of the souls of the dead and various witches, which she leads from her mountain home in the Hörselberg, which that's a whole other thing. Don't have time to explain that. But she drives a wagon and occasionally will ask passersby to help her repair it. Those who help are rewarded with the wood chips that result from the repair, and if the helper is smart enough to keep the wood chips, they'll find that they've changed it into gold after Holda has left. Perchta's train of followers, as seen here, depicted here, are typically supposed to be the souls of unborn children, or children who died before being baptized. They're known as the Heimchen, and Perchta is their special protector. You can see here they are again, and here's a plow, another thing that's traditional for Perchta. So it's traditional on Epiphany Eve, January 5th, to set out a bowl of sweet milk and a large number of spoons on a table dressed with fresh linens. Remember, Perchta is very particular about fresh linens. Then Perchta will lead her train into the house, and the children will drink small spoonfuls of the sweet milk, and that's all the nourishment they need for their trip through the earth. Homes who do this will find that Frau Perchta has blessed their household with peace and happiness throughout the year. And also, however, if you set all your spoons out for Perchta and find one of them missing the next day, the member of the household to whom that spoon belonged will unfortunately die before the next Epiphany. On the other hand, if there is any milk left over in the morning, if you feed it to your chickens or your cows, they'll grow strong and prosperous in the coming year. Perchta, whose name derives from a word referring to Epiphany. Epiphany is her special day. She can be found with her train of followers, now called Perchten, seen here on Epiphany Day, in a wild procession known as a Perchtenlauf, a Perchten run, just like a Krampuslauf, you have a Perchtenlauf. Perchta herself is among the procession, generally represented by a two-sided mask, which I promise is what's going on here in this heavily watermarked photo. One side is nice and kind, and the other side is ugly and cruel. I promise it's there on the other side. And this double nature is represented by the Perchten, her followers, as well. The troop is divided among the Shiach Perchten, the bad Perchten, and the Schön Perchten, the beautiful Perchten. They're beautiful and ugly Perchten. And among these two groups are a wide variety of beasts, creatures, and fancy lads. You can see, look at this smiling gentleman. He's one of the Schön Perchten. They include, but are, believe me, by no means limited to the Habergeist, a two-legged, giraffe-necked, snapping-jawed goat. You can see here being conducted by the elf who told Hermie he could never be a dentist. You got hobby horse riders in old imperial cavalry uniforms. You got fancy whip-cracking boys in a practice called Opperschnalzen. You got the Vorteufel, the lead devil, who usually looks just like a Krampus carrying a pitchfork or some kind of farm implement, like you can see there. Then you have 30 plus Schönperchten, Kappenträger, cap carriers. They wear Tafelkappen, which are these enormous board hats that are covered decoratively with mirrors, flowers, chains, garlands, ornaments, whatever. Some of these hats are over 8 feet tall, and they have to be supported by neck and back braces. There's other hats that might include taxidermied animals on them, for example. All sorts of things. There's bears. There's clowns. You get biblical figures like King Herod and the Three Kings. And then you remember these guys from Bible, right? The Krampuses in the Bible? Here they are. But yeah, King Herod and his soldiers and stuff. Then there's the Schnabelpercht, the beaked Percht, who, like the Czech Luka, comes to inspect homes for tidiness in small groups, usually like 4 or 5, softly saying "ga ga 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 ga" with their beaks that sometimes clack. They carry brooms for sweeping, along with, most notably, their giant wooden scissors to threaten those who aren't keeping up with their chores. Who knows what Perchta-like thing they might do. Additionally, various animals, such as boars, bats, werewolves, dragons, birds might be represented by costume figures in the Perchtenlauf. There's a frog-like creature called the Wassermann. Then there's various forest spirits, such as wood people, moss people, pinecone people, mushroom people. Those are various Schönperchten, the beautiful Perchten. The Shiach-Perchten are usually witches, or, devilish creatures that look like Krampuses. Some people think that the Perchten were first, and the Krampus is a derivative of the Percht. That may be true, who knows. But each region has its own traditional Perchten, so this is just, believe me, a tiny sampling. Perchten runs are still held in many Alpine, German, Austrian, and Swiss regions. Here's the Swiss variations. These are called, it's called a Schuhklaus, a beautiful Nicholas. So you can see they've got fancy hats, like those Kappenträger, but yeah, I don't know. Look at the beautiful blush on that guy's cheeks. Anyway, yeah, so I mean, that's it. That's the broad strokes of the 12 days of Christmas. But next week, we'll zero in on a specific day within that range, namely New Year's, and we'll answer the question, how do you celebrate Christmas when you also want to outlaw God? Anyway, until then, have a good Christmas.